Welcome to the Brain Lab. Today I'm going to talk with you about an issue that's facing every age and demographic in the world, and it has to do with your brain. I'm Bryan. I'm the COO of Infinite Mind. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Brain Lab. This is the Brain Lab, a podcast about brain health, cognitive performance, and skills like speed reading that strengthen how we process information. And in each episode, we'll translate neuroscience into practical insights that you can use. We're outsourcing our ability to think, and this issue touches everyone. I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I want to know if it rings true for you too. Think about it. Your kid reaches for a device to find the answer to a question or an issue that they could have worked out on their own. But they don't because it's faster and it's easier to just look it up on their phone. Or at work, you lean on AI to get things done because there's no time to sit and wrestle with the problem. Or a retiree catches himself drifting in the middle of a conversation and thinks, why can't I focus like I used to? What do I do about it? On the surface, those look like three different problems. In the brain, they're the same one. Every one of them is our attention getting shorter and our deep thinking slipping away. We are handing our mental work over to our machines. We're not reading, we're not studying, we don't learn things for ourselves anymore. We type a question into a box and let it hand us an answer. And when we're bored, we reach for something that entertains and numbs us instead of something that stretches us. The work that these tools produce is convenient, and it's good enough. It makes life easier. It just doesn't ask anything of our brains, and so we get slower at staying sharp, slower at deciding, slower at thinking for ourselves. Technology isn't necessarily the villain here, but it's gotten so powerful that if we aren't careful, it will outpace us, and we will stop using our minds anywhere near the level that they're built for. When that happens, we start losing the things that made us formidable in the first place. Memory, problem solving, original thought, just plain reason. So here's the question that's on the table, at least for me. Do we surrender our thinking and our independence to the very technology that we built and lose ourselves in doing it? Or do we hold on to our human spark by using technology to stay vibrant and cognitively capable so that we are active participants in the rapidly changing future? Humanity is standing at a crossroads. For the first time in recorded history, the human brain is at the center of a problem that reaches into every stage of human life. What we do with this moment decides the future for our children, our current workforce, and the generation that's heading into retirement. And what I'm saying isn't just speculation. Educators are already talking about it. Scientists are talking about it. Governments are talking about it. Now is the time to start facing this reality for ourselves. We don't need to dwindle in the face of overwhelming technological advancement, but we need to understand the stakes and take action. On January 15th of this year, Dr. Jared Horvath, who was a former teacher who became a cognitive neuroscientist, testified in front of a Senate committee about the impact that increased access to technology has on our children. And he said something that should make every parent stop and pay attention. He said, "A sad factor our generation has to face is our kids are less cognitively capable than we were at their age. Every generation has outperformed their parents until Gen Z, the first generation in modern history to underperform us on basically every cognitive measure: attention, memory, literacy, numeracy, executive function, general IQ, even though they go to more school." As a parent, you don't need a Senate hearing to feel that one. You've seen it at your own kitchen table. You've watched homework that used to take real thinking turn into homework that takes some clicking. You know the reflex. The second something gets hard, the hand goes for the device, not to learn, but to get away from the discomfort of learning. Horvath's argument is simple. When we build a kid's whole education around screens and constant help, we unintentionally strip out the very things that made school, school. Things like reading and focus and problem solving, the stubbornness to stick with a hard question long enough to actually understand it. And if you want proof that this is showing up in real results, just look at reading. In 2024, the nation's report card showed reading scores falling again. 4th and 8th graders both scored lower than they did in 2022. Fewer than a third of students in those grades are reading at the level that the test calls proficient. And so this is the part that should hit everybody in the chest. Around 40% of 4th graders are below the most basic reading line, and about a third of 8th graders are too, meaning a huge share of kids are struggling with the foundational reading skills that everything else depends on. And it isn't only the younger grades. In 2024, 12th grade reading scores came in lower than in 2019 and lower than in 1992. Our high school seniors aren't trending up over time either. They're trending down. That matters because reading was never just a subject, it's the gateway to learning. When reading weakens, everything downstream gets harder. Science, history, the word problems in math, the ability to think a thing all the way through. Life itself just gets harder. So the question is, what changed in the world that our kids are growing up in? Common Sense Media found that entertainment screen time, and that's not counting schoolwork, jumped hard in the pandemic years. Tweens averaged 5 hours and 33 minutes a day. Teens, 8 hours and 39 minutes. And that didn't snap back. The report is clear that this wasn't just kids stuck at home for a season. Screen use crept up from 2015 to 2019 and then surged from 2019 to 2021. And then it just stayed there. We didn't live through a temporary moment. We built a habit. That's a whole lot of hours training the brain for fast dopamine hits and constant novelty, and far less time training the brain for sustained attention, reading stamina, and deep comprehension. So when we ask why kids can't focus, why is reading harder? Why do they come apart the second something takes patience? We're not describing a character flaw. We're describing conditioning. We're talking about what the brain practices every single day. And the bigger issue is this. We told an entire generation that convenience is the same thing as progress. We built systems that remove friction, remove struggle, remove the need to sit with complexity, and then we act surprised when the next generation has less ability to do exactly that. Which leads to the question that I can't shake. What kind of future did we hand our children if we taught them to let technology think for them, right at the moment that same technology is becoming powerful enough to outcompete them? If that scares you for the kids, good, it should. But it gets worse because the same thing is happening to the adults. And it's not just because we're lazy, it's because we're being forced to keep up. That's what Gen X and the millennials are living right now. Trying to stay valuable in a working world that moves faster than any human brain was ever built to move. And to keep up, we're handing over our creativity, our judgment, our reasoning, one task at a time. Those of us already in the workforce are worried about our careers because AI isn't a someday problem. It is here now. And it isn't just changing how we work, it's changing what work even is. Millions of adults are asking a question they never thought they'd even have to ask. Will my job still be here in a world where a machine can do good enough thinking at scale and for practically free? And to be clear, I'm not just hyping an emotional theme here. This is actually measurable. Researchers at MIT built something they call the Iceberg Index, which maps where AI's ability overlap with human work. Their conclusion wasn't the robots took your job. It was even more unsettling than just that. AI already has the capacity to do work currently performed across almost 12% of the American workforce. Not just tech jobs, we're talking finance, healthcare, professional services, especially the administrative and cognitive tasks that used to need a person sitting in a chair. And the MIT paper itself is very clear about what that number means. It's measuring technical exposure, where AI can perform occupational tasks, not predicting exact job loss timelines. It is not a prediction of who gets laid off or when. So look at what's already being reported out in the open. Challenger Gray and Christmas, a firm that tracks layoff announcements, said that by September of 2025, it had counted 17,375 job cuts explicitly attributed to AI, plus another 20,219 that they chalked up to broader technological updates, the kind that usually means AI does it too. And the economists interpreting all of this land in the same place. AI-related displacement is happening, even if the full magnitude is still being debated. Now, here's the part we, as Gen X and millennials, feel in our bones. Using AI isn't optional anymore. It's turning into a job requirement. We're expected to answer faster, produce faster, ship faster. And the second that speed becomes the standard, shortcuts become the culture. And that's where the real danger lives. Not just in job replacement, in the skill getting replaced inside of you. Because when you lean on the machine to think for you, day after day, you train the wrong habit. You stop wrestling with the problem. You stop reading deeply. You stop building the mental muscle that creates original thought. It's true, you get output, but you lose capacity. you start to lose yourself. And that's why the internet is filling up with what people now call AI slop. That's low-grade content, cranked out at scale, often with little regard for accuracy. And it exists because it's fast, it's cheap, and it's good enough to get clicks. And every time we accept it, it's not just annoying. It changes what we tolerate, and it lowers the bar for thinking. And if you pull back far enough, this stops being about jobs at all. It's about truth. The World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report for 2024 named misinformation and disinformation the single most severe short-term risk facing the world, and said plainly that AI is pouring gasoline on it. Manipulated, distorted information produced at a scale we've never seen, in a world drowning in synthetic content. It gets harder and harder to tell what's real. And not because people are stupid, but because the volume of disinformation is bigger than any one person can sort. So yes, the workforce is being transformed, but the deeper problem is what it's doing to us. We're being trained to accept thinking that we didn't do, knowledge that we didn't earn, and answers that we didn't verify. If we keep going down that road, we don't just risk losing our jobs. We risk losing the internal cognitive skills that make us adaptable. These are things like creativity, reasoning, discernment, the judgment to know when something's off, the very abilities we're going to need most to stay valuable in a world that's accelerating. So, we've talked about the kids, we've talked about the working adults. Now let's talk about what happens when the job ends and all that structure just disappears. Because the brain doesn't just retire, it craves novelty and structure. That's how it stays sharp and vibrant. And when the daily demand drops off, the brain doesn't just sit politely on standby, it adapts to the easier life that you've handed it. So here's the third question that our world is facing. What happens to a whole generation when millions of people walk out of mentally demanding work at the exact moment that cognitive decline is becoming one of the defining health threats of aging? We're currently living through the biggest demographic shift any of us will see in our lifetime. The largest generation in the history of the world, the baby boomers, is leaving the workforce. And the scale is hard to wrap your mind around. We've hit what people are calling peak 65. More than 11,200 Americans turning 65 every single day in 2024 alone. And it stays that high for years. As they retire, a lot of them trade an active, demanding environment with deadlines and people and schedules and responsibility for a lifestyle that can become more sedentary and cognitively complacent if it isn't designed with intention. Retirement itself isn't the problem. The problem is losing all that built-in mental resistance overnight. When we stop challenging our brains, they atrophy. And here's the connection that you may not realize. The moment that the work structure is gone, modern technology makes it unbelievably easy to swap challenge for comfort without you ever noticing that you did it. Almost everybody's carrying a smartphone now. Pew puts it at around 91% of American adults. So when the day gets quieter, technology offers something that feels like structure, but isn't. Endless entertainment and constant interruption. AARP's own research shows how deep technology now runs through everyday life for people over 50. And the time adds up. Adults 60 and older average more than 4 hours a day of screen-based leisure. That's the thing about the brain. It doesn't retire, it adapts. When your day stops asking you to focus, to plan, to solve, to remember, you don't hold on standby. You settle into a lower gear, and there's strong research behind this. In one long-running study, verbal memory declined 38% faster after retirement than before it, even after accounting for normal age-related decline. So let me pull that out of the lab and bring it into real life. There are real moments where we experience this cognitive adaptation that are easy to miss because they don't feel dramatic. You stop reading long things like books and full articles because it's tiring. So you drift to scanning headlines and watching the news and whatever TV show is on. You stop learning new tools because it's easier to let somebody else handle that. You're halfway through a conversation and you suddenly realize your attention has drifted. You walk into a room and forget why you came in and you laugh it off. You watch more content and you remember less. Your calendar becomes empty and your mind follows it. And none of that means that you're declining. It means that you're human. It means your brain is doing exactly what it always does, answering whatever your life is asking of it. That alone would be serious, but our seniors are also facing real and rising stakes as dementia and Alzheimer's reach into more and more families. The World Health Organization has warned that the number of people living with dementia is on track to triple by 2050, from 50 million to 152 million. And if you want a generational gut check, here's another uncomfortable data point. A nationwide study reported that baby boomers scored lower on cognitive functioning tests than previous generations, and that boomers already start having lower cognition scores than earlier generations at age 50 to 54. So, here's the truth that we have to face. This isn't about fear, it's about our agency. The same brain that adapts to less can adapt to more. There are good evidence-based reasons to believe that structured training helps protect cognitive health. The National Institute on Aging describes cognitive health as the ability to think, learn, and remember clearly. And the newer research keeps pointing to the same thing. Staying mentally engaged is one of the real ways we protect it. An NIH-funded follow-up study tied a cognitive speed training program to a 25% lower rate of dementia diagnosis in the group that got speed training plus the booster sessions. So I'll ask you again, what happens to a generation when millions step out of cognitively demanding work right when protecting the brain has never mattered more, and right when that same brain is still fully able to adapt in whatever direction we train it? So, we've talked about our kids, we've talked about the working adults, and we've talked about what happens when the structure falls away in retirement age. 3 stages of life, but one pattern. The brain becomes what you practice, and modern life is training us toward convenience by default. So the question was never if we adapt. We already are. All of us every day are adapting. The question is whether it happens by default or on purpose in all of these cases. And that's really the whole thing. Everyone on Earth is standing at the same crossroads together. And what we do now sets the shape of what comes next. At the center of every part of it is the human brain. We ran so hard into the future building technology to make human life better that we ended up building something smarter and more capable than we are. It is rapidly changing every aspect of human life on this planet. This is like the Industrial Revolution or the arrival of the internet, except that for the first time, the impact is not a limited area of human life that is affected by the advancements we've invented. It is literally every part of human life, and it is not something that we can contain. There's no putting it back. The cat is out of the bag. We opened Pandora's box. There's no shoving this technology back inside. And honestly, we might not want to. The benefits that AI and modern technology offer are considerable and can solve many problems in health, longevity, global conflict, famine, and more. These are things that we've been stuck on for generations. However, if we wish to participate in this future as active contributors, in control of the destiny of the human race, we cannot hand ourselves over to convenience and comfort, because that surrender never happens all at once. It happens subtly. We trade attention for stimulation. We trade reading for skimming. We trade reasoning for output. And we trade the hard work of learning for the quick relief of outsourcing it. One small, reasonable feeling trade at a time. So we have to keep learning. We have to continue growing in the ways that keep the brain active and vital. We must regularly challenge our own thinking on purpose so we don't go through life on autopilot. The way we do that comes down to 2 things that have always worked: reading and regular cognitive training. Now, before I go further, I owe you some honesty because I would be a hypocrite otherwise. I'm not here to tell you to stop using AI. I use it. I used it to make this very video. I used it to comb through studies I'd never have found on my own, to pull numbers out of long reports, and to pressure test whether my argument actually held together. It expanded what I was able to understand, and it made this video better. So I'm not against using these tools to sharpen our work or widen what we know. AI has a place, and it's not going anywhere. Pretending otherwise would be foolish. The whole game is how you use it. There's a version where the machine does your thinking, and there's a version where the machine makes your thinking stronger. From the outside, they might look almost identical, but on the inside, they're opposites. So let me give you the actual difference, the way I try to work it. When I was building this video, I didn't just ask the AI to help me make my case. I asked it to argue against me. I told it to give me the strongest possible version of, Bryan, you're wrong, this whole worry is overblown. People said the same thing about calculators, and books turned out to be fine. I made it argue against my own thesis, because if my argument can't survive AI's best counter, It doesn't deserve to be in this video, and it doesn't deserve to be in your head. I stayed in the driver's seat. I made it argue with me. I checked its work against the real thing. I kept the final call for myself. The tool does more, and I do more too. That's the version that leaves you sharper. The other version, where you take the first answer, never push on it, never verify it, never form your own opinion, that's the one that hollows you out while you're not looking. So use it. Just don't fall asleep at the wheel. Because when you strip all of this down, it comes to one decision. We let convenience do the training, or we train our own minds on purpose. AI and modern technology aren't going anywhere. The only real question is whether they leave us sharper or leave us so comfortable we stop using the very thing that made us human. And nothing replaces a good book. Nothing. Not a summary, not a headline, not a 30-second clip, not an algorithm feeding you whatever it decided you'd click on. Reading opens your mind to ideas that aren't yours yet. It forces you to think for yourself and to come to your own conclusions. You take in new information and you make new knowledge out of it. Knowledge that we obtain ourselves becomes the power to act, create, innovate, and change. Reading doesn't just fill your head with information, it builds capacity. It trains attention, it strengthens comprehension. It forces your mind to hold one thought long enough to understand it and test it and argue with it and make it your own. That is the exact opposite of cognitive complacency. Reading also has a physical impact on our brains. Reading exercises current neural pathways and supports the formation of new connections. It pushes us to use more of our brain and our intellect, resulting in a stronger, more vital mental state. There's evidence that reading and other mentally demanding activities line up with better cognitive outcomes over time as we age. The National Institute on Aging says the same thing in probably better words. Cognitive health is the ability to think, learn, and remember clearly. And staying mentally engaged is one of the ways you hold on to it. Cognitive training, like Infinite Minds, activates the brain by training the skills modern life keeps trying to remove. Focused effort, speed of processing, and mental flexibility. Exercises such as vision therapy and speed reading and cognitive brain training awaken the brain and activate more of it as we read and learn. This helps to more rapidly absorb and synthesize information. It pushes us to forge new ways of reading and increases rapid mental processing. We close the gap between the high-paced speed at which our brains can think and the rate at which we read and absorb new information. And this isn't just a nice motivational idea. There are real indicators in the research that structured, targeted training matters. That same NIH-funded follow-up study linked a specific cognitive speed training approach to a 25% lower rate of dementia diagnosis in the group that got the speed training, plus booster sessions, drawn from Medicare claims data. So here's the bridge, and here's how we cross it. The threat was never technology. The threat is what happens to a human brain when it's trained to stop trying. When everything is instant, effortless, and outsourced, your mind doesn't stay neutral. It adapts to that environment. It gets comfortable. It gets slow. But the same technology that can weaken us through convenience can empower us through training. Used the right way, it stops being the couch and becomes the gym. Technology is not going anywhere, so we must use it to improve the tools that we already have, our brains, and the intellect that they contain. And if we get this right, if we choose depth over drift, and training over ease, then AI doesn't replace us. It elevates what we're capable of because we stayed awake.
Thanks for listening to the Brain Lab. If you're interested in putting today's science into practice, you can explore more at Infinite Mind. Until next time, keep training your brain.